Mm.
Welcome, everyone. This is Q&A number 9. We have 4 questions today. Okay, so the first one is from Elena. Placebo effect. If what we think or what we feel cannot materialize into reality, then how can we explain the placebo effect? Because there are certain cases, and it has happened to me in the past, when I told myself that a pain would definitely go away, or I just felt that it was about to pass and it happened. Or cases when I took a pill, and for example, within 2 minutes, my headache disappeared. I can't call that anything other than placebo because in 2 minutes, the pill couldn't have taken effect yet. So it's clear that the placebo effect exists. How does this happen? Is the mind capable of producing physical sensations that aren't real? Or could you explain, please, a bit more about how the placebo effect works technically, how it manifests in the mind? When I read that, I was like, it's like, I'm not a doctor, but it's like only a little bit of the question. So, let me just look through it again. Well, I mean, first, let me just, if somebody's not too familiar with what that is, I think they've done studies, I mean, with many different things. So let's say like cholesterol medication, and then they have two control groups. So like one group, they're going to give the actual medication, and the second group, they give them a sugar pill, which is nothing, just, and then the whole study is that you tell both groups that they are receiving the medication, I think, and then to see if the group that didn't get it, what happens in their body. And then I think, I don't know the percentage, but a lot of people would take the sugar pill and then their cholesterol would get lower just because they believed that they were taking the medication. So that's basically what the placebo effect is. Um, there are like a number of things that come to mind. Like number one is the power of suggestion, which that is. So when somebody says, take this pill, and what this is a medication. So it's the power of suggestion. But then what I was also going to say is we often talk about like mind versus body, but in reality, there is no separation in the same way that if you look at a dog, you would never say like its brain, right? Because the brain, you could call the mind the non-physical part of the brain, or I mean, could you even say it's just the brain? Let's just call it. When you look at a dog, are you going to say that the brain is separate from its body? It's just you could say that mind is part of the body, right? So in that sense, whatever happens in the nervous system, and our mind, I guess, is so powerful, the brain is connected to everything, that when somebody says this is a cholesterol medication, some people may, I don't know exactly why it doesn't work 100% of the time, but since it's all connected. Oh, the other thing I was going to say, because this is a little bit like science is still not really, fully proving this, that it's my guess that in the future, every emotion that is suppressed, so you take anger, will be directly, like they'll study it and they'll prove this, that it's directly connected to certain diseases. So it's like you suppress anger like so deeply, this part of the body will be affected and this part of. So if that's true, even though it hasn't been proven, then you could say that depending what happens in the brain and the emotions, it will affect the body. But they haven't really proven this fully, right? Do you have anything, Joe?
Well, it made me think about the the conflating of the mind or the brain and the ego, and with things like the placebo effect. Although I don't know anything, from a medical perspective about it, so I couldn't comment on that. I know that the ego will like to claim the results, that there's some kind of like something to do with one's willpower or something that someone did, whether believing or whatever. But as you said before, the entire system is one. There's no like this is telling this to do this. These are words that we use to describe the functions that happen, you know. So, um, it's interesting to me uh, to think about, where the ego comes into play and how like the claiming of doing something would be part of this, where, again, it would be my best guess. I don't know on a scientific level that it's your entire system working to do something, and maybe our bodies are more able to heal themselves with uh, things like suggestion over like physical medication. But again, this is pure speculation on my part. But I know that our fascination with it will be because we think there is someone doing something, as in there is a me believing has this magical effect where the body, including the brain, is doing its thing the whole time, and the ego couldn't know less about what's going on there. Um, yeah, that's my thoughts on it, but to re-stress that I don't know anything about the placebo effect from a scientific standpoint.
And the part where she says, is the mind capable of producing physical sensations that aren't real? So, I mean, absolutely. They're not real in the sense that I guess we have to talk about and use the, example of someone that's enlightened. Um, what's so funny is that if you look at wherever you are physically and you look around, so let's say you're perfectly safe, there's no noise, nothing is happening, nothing has ever happened. And so that should be enough information for the body to be perfectly peaceful, right? But that's not the case with everybody, pretty much. And so um, the fact that either in awakening, right? I mean, I guess we just use that's a better example. In awakening, where you could have moments where you're having huge amounts of fear and nothing is happening physically, that could be described as the mind being capable of producing sensations that aren't real, or you could say not based on reality. Because it's so strange. How could you feel fear in the body and your eyes are looking and there's nothing? There's not a lion trying to kill you, right? So there's a complete disconnection there with reality. Um, the other thing I was going to say about, um, well, I guess it's just in general, the mind is so incredibly powerful. Um, but I'm not sure I'm going to be able to communicate this. I was just thinking of what it is to be suggestible, I guess is the word. Like, for example, I imagined, um, there's a mother and her son was in a car accident, a really bad car accident. And so she's in the hospital and he's having surgery, but it's like really, he could die. And so she's waiting there in the waiting room, like feeling a huge amount of fear and everything. She's just completely triggered, just waiting for the news. And so what I imagined was, what if the doctor just lies, hypothetically? So it's like he just died like a minute ago, and then the doctor says everything went fine and he's alive, right? Nobody would do that. But just to think about it, her body would calm down. So isn't that odd? Like what is that? Like what exactly is happening? It's not based on reality. So reality would be that she would see her son alive and speaking to her. So what is that? Isn't that suggestion? Like when you say it's just somebody saying words and then you believe the words and then from that belief, your whole nervous system calms down, but it's a lie in this case, right? So it just shows you how the mind functions and how it can control your emotions, how things can be triggered.
Yeah, and the mind being capable of producing physical sensations that aren't real made me think about dreaming and how your mind can reproduce not the actual sensation, but it can use real physical experience to sort of do its own version. You know, when you dream, you can feel pain, you know, if you get punched or something, you can hear sounds, but they're just illusions of the mind. Um, so yeah, it's very, and on psychedelic trips, it can give you experiences that are more tangibly real as far as you're concerned than this waking reality. Um, so the limits of the mind's capability to produce sensation is enormous. Um, Discerning whether it's real or not, is based down to the evidence, the physical evidence of what happened or not, I suppose. Um, but yeah, it can at least replicate sensation to a incredibly convincing degree, that's for sure.
Yeah. Let's see if there's anything else. I'm just trying to picture the main thing, like what was she really, really asking? If you just kind of remove everything, it's like, what is the core of this? Like, is it a little bit of, because, Elena has said before that she's afraid that if she thinks, like, for example, she hates somebody and says something, that they'll get a disease
Yeah.
kind of.
Well, I suppose it's the placebo potentially be used as a case study for some sort of manifestation being authentic. Could be there. And yeah, if I can take a pill and something can change in my body, then why can't I manifest? Well, then why can my bad thoughts not manifest bad outcomes? Um, that's maybe one driving force behind the question.
And just to address, like, one more time, like manifestation, but from a different angle, it's so hard to like talk about it. But let's say that somebody has an experience where over and over and over, it seems that they're being given proof that they have the ability to materialize things. I think about it and then it comes, and then they do it over and over, and it becomes so convincing. I think the only way that I can describe it is, but who told you that those things were not going to happen? Or that it was not, you could say destiny, that those things were going to happen. And so you watching them happen has nothing to do with you actually having the power, like a superhero. I've got this power. It's gonna, like, materialize now. I have this image almost, I just have to use words like God is just everything and is in control of everything. And then you think that by some coincidence, and I don't mean coincidence as random, I mean as have you ever heard of coincident? That's just two incidents together. That's what the word means. And so it's like you could see it over and over, and then you convince yourself, I've got the power to do this. When in reality, you're just seeing something that was always going to happen. And so what power do you have, right? You don't have that power. Um, and so, yeah.
Yeah, but the ego will crave the illusion of that power. So it'll still sound good, like, well, even if I don't really have it, can I at least think that I'm doing it and see
Yeah.
things happen? Um, but I think that, it's important to address the fear of uh manifesting negatively, because it just brings up you're basically afraid of bad things happening in the real world, which is a reasonable fear to have, I suppose. Um, but in the same way that Steve said about having the power for like things to happen and that there being someone here that is making these things happen is equally untrue for anything negative. If you think, oh, I'm really sure that someone's going to die, I better stop thinking that, otherwise, you know, it's going to happen. Um, isn't the case either.
And I just thought that I get the fear. So if you feel like a lot of fear and then something horrible is about to happen, which is so part of this process. But not that nobody wants bad things to happen, especially serious things. So I think most of the time it's not something serious, it's just a lot of mental suffering or emotional suffering. Um, I was gonna say, I think I forgot. But oh, that basically the idea is okay, yeah, that now I remember. So with this whole manifestation thing, it's so silly because people think if they get what they want, these objects, that it's good, right? And then if they don't, it's bad. I mean, it's hilarious. Only the ego could come up with something like that. And I've seen on my journey where the ego would say, "This is terrible," like over and over and over, like, "Why is this happening? Why is this happening?" And then with enough time, I was able to see that every single negative experience is actually, if you want to call it a positive, that it led to something, to the next thing and the next thing. Almost like every difficult experience is there to liberate you especially if you're going into the emotions instead of constantly trying to find a solution out of that experience and you're going into the tears and everything. So it's like, could you even say that unpleasant things are negative once you're able to see for yourself that they have some really positive effect after? So people that are chasing manifestations, it's like one thing that came to mind is, but wouldn't the ultimate manifestation be that you're happy without those things? And then the ego's like, don't even start with that. I don't care about feelings. I want objects, right? But that is the ultimate manifestation, right? When you, it's like if you can be happy without it, it almost sounds impossible. That's the miracle. If you can, it takes forever, right? But yeah, I would consider that to be the only real manifestation. Okay. Let me just open this. So this is from Ben. Facing fears and OCD. Hello. Ever since I was 4 years old, I have experienced symptoms of OCD. I remember it was around this time I started having visions, images, fantasies about being raped and murdering the actor of the rapist in my mind. Unsure if this is real trauma or intrusive thoughts. Obviously, it just got much worse as I grew older. These thoughts used to really bother me, especially during 12 to 16. I remember throwing up due to the disgust I had with myself. It was around this time I became addicted to a cocktail of drugs. At this point, I became numb to my internal world. At around 18 years old, my life fractured and I began my spiritual journey. I was always into philosophy and whatnot, but I never applied any of it to my life. For around 6 or so months, I became infatuated with spirituality, really believing for the first time I was more than a human. I was particularly interested in astral projection, psychedelic entities, messages from the universe, etc. These were heavily fueled and reinforced by the OCD part of my brain. It became a compulsion. Around a year and a half ago, I came across Steve on TikTok. The concept of the ego made much more sense to me and quickly retrieved me from the world of spiritual nonsense. It was particularly valuable to me as I believed myself to have OCD, which is characterized largely by ego dystonic thoughts. Definition: ego dystonic refers to thoughts, feelings, or behaviors that are inconsistent with a person's self-image or values, causing distress and discomfort. So for the last year and a half, I slowly dissolved the part of me that believed OCD was real, which I still don't really know how I feel because I believe everyone has a part of them that has OCD. I just happen to have a larger experience with this part. That's kind of how I feel about all mental illnesses. Anyways, understanding the ego has essentially cured my OCD because I can sit and watch my ego with zero judgment. Until similar to Steve and his cataracts, he made a video a while ago about facing fear, so I went to the doctor, which is a big trigger for me, and decided to get my acid reflux and IBS looked at, which has resulted in me getting a colonoscopy. For the last month or so, I have been waiting for the appointment, which is on Friday. I have had panic attacks every day since. I have also noticed my OCD returning. I have been extremely compulsive. My hands are raw from washing them so much. Every minute of my life is scheduled, and it is difficult to leave the house. Every time I eat food, I believe I am having an allergic reaction. The list goes on and on. This is a two-part question. First, I believe that it is difficult for me to experience emotions because I have either experienced so much, or more likely, I have become so numb to my thoughts and emotions because I have developed this distance as a coping mechanism. Plus, I have compulsive behaviors which soothe my feelings and thoughts. Second, I feel like avoiding the reality that I experience OCD is a spiritual bypass. I will live with it for the rest of my life because that happens to be my brain chemistry. But at the same time, I feel like labeling myself is also damaging spiritual bypassing. Also, I have been diagnosed and medicated in the past for OCD, but due to the understanding of the ego, I was able to go off my meds and have been living my best life since. Even now, I know that this experience is because I am triggered and I will return to my more calm self after the procedure. I apologize for the length of this post. I was attempting to be as clear as possible and felt it was all important. Okay. So I'll have to look back because that was really long. Okay. Um, uh, okay.
I think kind of sort of defining what OCD is from the perspective of knowing what the ego is really helpful because it speaks to the core value of the ego, which is that I'm a good person. So OCD manifests in a lot of ways, but some of the symptoms that Ben has touched on there is intrusive thoughts and his definition. Uh, where was it? Was it dystonic?
Yeah.
Yeah, that oppose, your values and these things. So this is very much, like interacting with this very concrete sense of self, which has a clear boundary and a clear set of values, what is and what isn't. And then when it believes that these horrible thoughts belong to it, it causes immense distress and resistance to the thoughts. And this resistance causes us a lot of pain. I myself have experienced OCD, and like was given a diagnosis and everything like that, and medication. Um, but then what we're able to see is when the sense of self is fractured and becomes more transparent, um, we can stop labeling these thoughts as intrusive and they're just as valid as all of the other thoughts that supposedly belonged to the self and were within the boundaries of being acceptable. Um, these types of thoughts that are intrusive do tend to be violent, sexual, and anything else that is distressing. Um, to the ego. But these thoughts are expressions of our repressed emotion, especially. So they're actually the thoughts that we need to pay the most attention to. But OCD is so crippling because unless we know this about the ego, and we know it, but then when we actually see through it, then we're able to accommodate all of these supposedly intrusive thoughts, which are just uh, I know better or worse than any other thoughts that come into your mind, but they're the ones that are linked to more directly to the repressed emotions that are the fuel for them existing in the first place. Um, but yeah, there's a lot to go through. Ben's given us a lot of good stuff because there's so many things that like
Yeah.
relate to how OCD, but again, like all mental illness are manifestations of repressed emotion in one way or another. And OCD is a great example, I think, especially because there's already egoic labeling in the diagnosis of the condition. These are intrusive. These are not part of the thing that we think we are. But this doesn't exist. This doesn't exist. So that they arise as equals to all of our other thoughts for us to then see, accept, and start processing the emotions that they have arisen from. Um,
I just remember like the funniest one, not like the condition, but it's funny that it's seen like this, is Tourette's. That's like hilarious that people think that's a condition. And isn't it odd that the Tourette's, whatever it's called, syndrome is always something negative, right? So it's someone I've seen like that. I think it was like an Uber driver, and she says to the person that's riding, like, "Oh, I've got Tourette's, so just so if I say something, you'll know what it is." And then the person's driving, and then she says, "Whore," right? Or like, "Fuck you," and it's like that's just rage. And for whatever reason, that person's mind, not everybody has Tourette's. The mind is so complex. That's why people have different problems, right? Different mental illnesses. And so, I mean, that's so simple. It's someone who has suppressed, they have had reason to have so much anger in their life from a very early age, and they suppressed it thousands of times probably. Their nervous system is overflowing with it. And guess what? Day in and day out, they're probably never expressing it consciously. And so that's one example, Tourette's. And then OCD and kind of ADD, which I mean, I joke, I've said to myself on this journey, I've probably experienced every mental illness, not every single, but like probably like 20 of them. Um, and what I was going to say about, oh, to give an example, where I saw this like in real time happening within me. So before, when I would make videos for TikTok, I would have a really big issue. And it's so strange because I discovered that the issue that I had with filming was just rage. And it shows the depth of the suppression because I was not like someone that was suppressing my rage by that point. But still, there was some moments where I was. It's a very strange thing. It's almost like the ego is able to kind of, oh, it's like you're not suppressing most of these, like in these situations. Well, maybe this one you're still going to be a little bit unconscious, so you're going to keep doing it. So I would be holding my phone trying to make videos, and when I would say any little thing that now to me seems absurd, like if I didn't say it perfectly or if I had a pause, I think that was a little bit of OCD where it's like, no, it can't have the tiniest pause, it can't have this. I would delete the video and then go back to zero. And as I would do this, go back to zero, my frustration, which just means my rage, is increasing. And what I would do is, until I discovered it, is I would do that for like 20 minutes. And what I now realize is that it was getting worse and worse. I was getting more frustrated, and yet there was no um what's the word? Acknowledgement of it. And so later on, what I did is when I had practiced even more rage, in real time with people, not with people, but when they would turn around, I realized. So one day I was like, mostly now it's easy to make videos. This kind of OCD thing is gone. I can kind of talk for a long time. But then it happened again because I wasn't liking what I was saying in the video. And then I'm like, interesting. So I try to speak and it seems like my mind just shuts down, which is kind of like ADD. And then it just hit me. I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting frustrated. So I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to like just let it out, make an angry face, just shake. And after 5 seconds of doing that, what had been bothering me for the past 20 minutes disappeared instantly. So you can literally see that it was as if the rage was taking most of the bandwidth of my mind, pulling my attention away. So it's like I tried to say one sentence, the next one would like evaporate. I couldn't think of the next idea. So literally the rage was pulling my attention away. And basically that's the same thing for, like you said, mental illness just comes from suppression. And it's incredible that like psychology still hasn't been able to see how deep that goes. And they're still calling it a mental illness. They still say that it's incurable. Um, there was something else, or if you want to add something, Joe.
Yeah. What was I thinking of? It was about what you just said. Yeah, about incurable. Oh, and that Ben was saying that he's had these intrusive thoughts from a very young age. And it's so unfortunate that, they get labeled as intrusive thoughts and there's no guidance through at that age. And it's so disturbing because your ego is becoming more concrete and, that you catastrophize consequence a lot more as a young child. So these things are incredibly disturbing. Um, but in reality, you had some repressed emotion that was ready to be seen at that age. That was all that was. And had the tools been available to you, you would have been able to express it and, not judge it and not be scared of it and all of these things. Um, because Ben went on to say that he would be, the way that his brain is wired means it's sort of a life sentence, which isn't true. If you do enough of this and you really empty the tank of the repressed emotion, your symptoms of OCD will deplete in perfect alignment. Again, I can speak from my own experience, having been diagnosed with OCD myself and medicated for it, that my experience with it has all but gone. What has gone. I'm not saying that, of course, every single case of this is going to be completely unique, um, but they all operate in the same way. Um, and about the current sort of lapse back into the physical manifestations of OCD with the hand cleaning. which yeah, is absolutely a nervous system soothing mechanism. So this trigger, the medical, stuff that's coming up for you is a big trigger for you. Too much for your nervous system to handle, clearly. So in comes the sort of safety mechanism to keep you regulated, which is the expression of the physical OCD symptoms, cleaning your hands and whatever else it may be. And that may be just needed uh, because because what's being kept from you is would be too overwhelming. But with that knowledge, you can maybe experiment with it a little bit. What you're able to do. You can see what comes up when you don't allow yourself to wash your hands, maybe one time. With a curiosity, there's no pressure to do anything. Um, but it's almost like or exactly the same as addictive behaviors. You're compelled to do the OCD routine because it soothes your nervous system and just distracts you from the things that are coming up. And what's horrible about these things is these symptoms are bad enough of themselves, but your body and nervous system deems those to be the safety blanket from the things that it actually perceives as the threat, which will be, the repressed anger and hurt and sadness and all of these things.
Yeah, and I was gonna talk about the very first thing that he said ever since I was 4 years old. There are like visions of being raped and murdering the rapist, basically. Um, and forever, for whoever's listening, this is probably the most difficult topic for most people because most people are identified with being a good person. And that, what he just described, I mean, it's kind of pedophilia in a way. And most people don't even want to hear about that. But, so if that's in your mind, whether you said like whether that happened to you or not, let's say somebody that actually happened to them, because the mind is perfectly symmetrical with the example of if you have a sense of superiority, it is completely linked to inferiority, right? That's how the mind works. And so if someone was raped, their mind will have the one that was raped, but also the rapist in their mind. It's just how the mind works. I think it's almost like a balance. And so the the practice around this is probably the most difficult because there will be the biggest judgment to even remember that stuff. But it is to go in the direction of those things. And so you said even, it happened when you were more 4 years old, but then from 12 to 16, I'm sure kept probably the images kept coming up. And then you were throwing up due to disgust. So that's very interesting. The level of disgust is so unbelievably huge that it affects the body, right? And it's very normal. Um, and so just in general, what I would recommend, and you could take your time or not do it, whatever you want, is to explore those things. And to what that means is to close your eyes and kind of so you have the topic in your mind. If there are scenes and if you can do it, then let them play out and see what happens, right? And it's incredibly difficult because when I would do things of a similar nature, my body would tremble and shake uncontrollably because that is literally the ego's judgment. Like you are reaching the very boundary of your identity as a good person. Beyond this, it's very dangerous ground to be in because you're like, this is uncharted territory. Like, how can you be going this deep? Um, so yeah, I just want to talk about that a little bit. And let me see. There was something else that was really good to talk about. Well, just in general, it's a fun fact that I is that pretty much everybody in the world is mentally sick, mentally ill because the ego is a sickness. And so those that think that they're very normal and it's like, oh, those people are mentally ill, it's a very big illusion, right? The fact that you have a mind that doesn't stop talking for no reason, you cannot enjoy the senses, you're never in the now. These are all traits of a sick human. And sadly, that is the natural, that's what's considered a normal human, right? I often like to think of how like psychologists and psychiatrists, they have a parameter of what a normal human being is, and that parameter is the sick human. So it's like, when they talk about isolation, oh, the longer you stay in isolation and you're not around anyone, you go crazy. And that's to say that a normal human, they will go crazy. That's what they would say. It's like, oh, if you don't see people, you're going to start to have hallucinations and it's very bad for you and all this stuff. Well, it's like, no, you've never seen a healthy human. This is the problem. If you've never seen a healthy human being, you think that it's normal for you for it to be, if you're alone, that it's bad for you. When in reality, those are just your inner demons coming to the surface, right? So I just wanted to say that. It's kind of frustrating but funny to see and to remind you that psychology, I don't know if it's my ego talking, but it's like, you know how there are other, I don't know if you call them disciplines or like surgery as an example. Surgery is a very established, is it called a discipline or I don't know what it's called, but it's very established, meaning for decades they know what to do. They know how to open up the human and take every precaution. But psychology is a sort of discipline where it's always changing and they like barely know anything yet. So I just wanted to remind people of that because it's not like surgery. You think that it's like, oh, it's just like surgery. It's just like this. It's not. The psychologists don't even use meditation because they probably think that it's not necessary, right? It should be their number one tool. And so if they don't even use meditation, then how much do they really know about the mind, right? Um,
Yeah, I was just going to touch on part at the bottom where Ben says, I feel like avoiding the reality that I experience OCD is a spiritual bypass. Um, so I think the bypass would be not engaging with the things that come up and just labeling it as like, oh, it's nothing. I can just watch it and that's enough. Um, I wouldn't I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a reality that of having OCD, because once you can sort of deconstruct what OCD is, then you wouldn't be bypassing it in that way. The bypass would be if you weren't engaging with it, where you weren't engaging with the fear that comes up, you know, the fear of these thoughts being true, for example. Um, uh, so the way to make sure you're not bypassing one way or the other is to allow what's there to come. Because these parts of ourselves, these thoughts need to be seen, as in like fully seen, because only in seeing them can they be accepted and felt and then released. And this will not mean that they don't need to be present anymore. They're attached or are a byproduct of repressed rage, uh, sadness, hurt, um, these things. So by looking at them, uh, you because you said another thing about bypassing by avoiding the reality that you have it, and then what was the other one? Um, but at the same time, I feel like labeling myself is also damaging spiritually bypassing. Um,
it's
yeah,
like I was going to say you could say that you have OCD, but you know that you know the traditional way of looking at mental illness, you've already seen that it's not real. And so it's like it doesn't matter if you do call it OCD, you know that it's not this like permanent thing. It comes from emotional suppression. So it's not, I don't think it's like damaging.
yeah. Um,
Well, this is not like unrelated, but I think it's just useful because everything is just related to emotions. That, what I think is the biggest transformation, like imagine someone they start their spiritual awakening, what would I like say is the biggest transformation? It is every moment that you're triggered and you're in some really difficult experience. What we've all been programmed to do is here's the pain. I'm going to think, think, think. So the number one thing is how do I solve this? So as it's here, deep grief and whatever it is, this is the mechanism that helped us survive our childhood, which is, oh, this thing is here. Don't even sit like don't even focus on the sensation. Start thinking your way out of it, right? So if somebody doesn't have a job or they have money issues and then suddenly they wake up in the morning and they're super triggered by that. There's so much fear, so much worrying. And then in that exact moment that it's arising, they're like, oh my God, who should I call? Like, am I going to be able to get a new job? That is the coping mechanism. And it's very, very painful. And the biggest transformation, of course, it happens slowly. It happens the more that you suffer, the resistance is kind of slowly going down is when there is pain and you cry, right? I understand it's not easy if you can't do that. It's like I said, it's going to happen naturally. It's almost like the more difficulty you go through, this mechanism of thinking your way out of it, that's what's slowly dying in the awakening process. But I wanted to say that because when we're having such a difficult experience, like I want to stress it, it's like an unbearable, like a really like it's like torture. You'll notice that you kind of just stay there doing nothing. You're not really feeling it. I mean, you are experiencing it. And what I mean by nothing is where are the tears? This is where most people that's what they experience. And so the biggest transformation is that when even to have that thought will take you in the direction of it. Like I should create a habit. If you can't cry, what if every time that there's a lot of pain, you just have the thought, I should cry. And it's okay if you can't. Even thinking every time, oh, crying maybe one day is going to happen. And eventually what happens when the transformation is complete, the other thing I want to stress is what dies is you wanting to find an external solution. So that's what dies. So eventually, when you've suffered beyond words, what happens is you give up, or your ego gives up on trying to find an external solution. And every time you're in deep suffering, the solution is, I'm going to cry. So it becomes an internal solution. This is probably the most difficult thing to change. Even people that are in deep suffering, it seems like they're almost suicidal, and yet it's still, I'm not even going to think about crying. I'm going to sit here and think my way out of it, which makes it even worse, right? So I wanted to share that even thinking about crying, that you will become someone that's just crying all the time in the future, that is the biggest, probably one of the biggest transformations that can happen. Wonder if there's anything else.
Well, there's a bit about so for the last year and a half, I slowly dissolved the part of me that believed OCD was real, which I still don't really know how I feel because I believe everyone has a part of them that has OCD. I just happen to have a larger experience. Um, yeah, I was just wondering whether that's a belief in the sort of labeled version of it being a reality, or whether like you're believing that you have this thing or not. Again, I think the labeling of the symptoms is actually quite detrimental. And then when you can see, where they come from, how they operate and why, then calling things, clumping certain symptoms or behaviors together as one thing becomes detrimental to seeing more of yourself. Um, so I just maybe a little caution about, the belief in something or not. They're just words to describe something, but in this case, quite unproductively, sadly. Um, I guess my point being to sort of throw it all away and just focus on exploring your resistance to the thoughts that come up and uh, the emotions that come up with that resistance.
Yeah, and I was going to mention that when he said that he would have it for life, it makes me think that often people think that the brain is like the rest of the body. So it's like, for example, I have a hand with 5 fingers, and obviously it's impossible that a sixth finger will grow, right? So that's impossible. But the brain is not like that. Like there's like the word like neuroplasticity. And when you're very young, that's why a child learns any language effortlessly, because it's almost like I imagine the brain being more fluid or almost soft. And then it's being all of the conditioning and all of the programming is happening in that stage. That's what's so sad because everything's, it's almost molding the brain in a certain way. And although it's very difficult to change the brain, in deep awakening it happens. I'm sure if you scan somebody's brain, like Artem's brain from the beginning to the end, it would look like a completely different brain. Not like completely, but I mean, many parts would just be very different. And so don't underestimate that that's possible. Now, the reason why the world thinks that that's mostly not possible is, for example, like mental illness, right? You have those like more severe ones, and then nobody seems to ever like truly cure them or it's completely gone. The reason is that only in something like a really deep awakening is someone kind of meeting that head on, and nobody does that. First, they're not telling people to do that. Second, it could be dangerous. They could become suicidal, all those things. It would have to be so controlled in a society that would be a little bit more enlightened. But it would be something like, um, if someone, I'm trying to think of a mental illness that's more severe. Um, well, it doesn't really matter. What I mean is, let's say that there's PTSD or CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And imagine that someone has a trigger, right? And then they just completely, if they have the trigger, they're like giant panic attacks. But if they kind of developed, it's kind of like terrible, but if they developed the ability to almost chase the trigger, or like I'm gonna find the trigger and then do it over and over with awareness and do that over and over, I'm guessing that eventually it would just disappear. But who does that in the world? I'm guessing like not a single person does that because it's so difficult already, and there isn't a system that knows this stuff. And so most people will then conclude, oh, you can't heal this. We've seen all these brains, they never change. All you can do is medicate them. But that's kind of an interesting, almost like an ad for awakening, that it can really change things that seem to be unchangeable. Like you could call it miracles, but it's just when you face things to such a degree, even the chemistry of the brain itself, I think, can change somewhat. Okay, I guess I'll go to the next one. This one's from Beate. Since a few weeks, things have changed for me drastically. In the past, I would observe thoughts, feel emotions, purge, observe ego layers. Now I have noticed that there is no more of my effort trying to do these things. It sounds like ego is exposed to me without any limitations. Deepest fears come to the surface every day. New ways of ego trying to be sneaky become crystal clear, as if all of the protection is gone and I am directly staring at the ego. It's been brutal. I don't get any break. Everything is exposed. Oh, sorry. I don't know what happened here. Let me just go back down. The page is like stuck. Let me just, okay. Um, Exposed. Okay. Also, I am going through the same thing during sleep. I dream about being exposed to a fear and I feel everything so deeply. I purge and feel all of the emotions while in a dream. I thought we are unconscious of dreaming, but I'm very conscious when dreaming. I am being tortured day and night as if I was under some spiritual attack. What is going on? I am losing my sanity. I am so tired. I also feel like I will either die or something terrible is going to happen to me. I feel that my days are counted. I don't know what is coming, but it's coming for me. It feels as if I'm falling into a black hole and I just know that I will crash and there is nothing I can do about it. I have no energy anymore to fight. I just want to give up and die. No, I am not suicidal. I feel that I am dying. I can't even access my mind. It's hard to find words, put sentences together. I feel like something is not right. At the same time, I'm experiencing some strange symptoms: chest pain, heart palpitations, nausea, dizziness, headache. I went to the doctors, and so far everything comes back good. I know that my Kundalini has stopped. at the heart, but I was just wondering if anybody experienced any symptoms like that to be linked to Kundalini. I just don't know what to make. I just don't know what to make out of that. Did I do something wrong? Should I ground myself more? Also, I feel that I don't want to reach full enlightenment or become self-realized anymore. My ego wants to live. Please advise me. Thank you. Well, the good news is that everything that you just described sounds like what happens right before self-realization. So like absolutely nothing is going wrong, but I know that it's like a living nightmare. From personal experience, it's just the worst. I used to say this is the worst possible thing that could have ever happened to me. There's nothing that could be worse than this. Um, but everything that you described is actually a sign of deep progress. Like what you said, new ways of the ego trying to be sneaky become crystal clear. So it's like your awareness has probably become very abiding, and so you catch everything, but there's it's still new. And so I think as you catch the ego, it's like very overwhelming to see all the angles and all the things that it's trying to do. Um, Maybe she can answer in the comments, but you said so in dreams, because dreams also become very emotional and they kind of become, yeah, part of your awakening journey. And so you said, I thought we are unconscious of dreaming, but I'm very conscious when I'm dreaming. So my question is, are you saying that you're always lucid dreaming? Because that would be very interesting because that almost never happens to me. I've had like little moments in dreams where I know that I'm dreaming, but very, very rare. So I don't know if you mean that when every time you have a dream. So what I actually mean, it's actually very specific. To be fully and completely conscious while dreaming, while being in the dream world, you would have to remember details like tomorrow I have a dentist appointment in the real world, right? That sort of thing. If you could remember that, then you could say that your awareness is there. So I just want to confirm. So if you can confirm that in the comments. Um, Torture day and night. That's exactly how I felt. Losing my sanity. You're probably like, fatigue, all of it. Yeah, so it feels like I'm falling into a black hole. Um, I think that that is the ego's experience. So maybe it would be interesting to kind of visually describe, I think, what's happening, what self-realization is. So inside of our minds, we all have a center of our experience, which is our identity, the main identity, right? And so the center of experience is who you think you are. We mentioned being a good person is one of them. And there are many, many other layers. And so this center of experience lives in your mind and it gives you a false sense of control. And so as you've been purging, feeling you crying, all sorts of things. You've gone into like rage and all this. And so that center is crumbling, or the power that it has to maintain its center is kind of doing this, right? And so self-realization is when it's so difficult to talk about it, but it's like before self-realization, your experience of yourself is it's the center, it's very fixed, it's like this concrete thing, right? But then what self-realization does is it removes the center. And so you can't find who you are anymore, which is funny because that's not no big deal. But while it's happening, it is the most terrifying thing. You will feel like you're losing your mind, that you're not going to be able to go back to a sane mind, right? That's one of the most terrifying things where you're like, I'm getting more and more crazy, and then I won't be able to live, I won't be able to work and think anymore. That's not going to happen. It's just these are temporary things. And I really do think that when it's about to happen, I don't know if it's happening or not, but it's like shaking it and shaking it until I think the center just disappears. And then when it disappears, um, it's it's odd because at the same time that it's a huge transformation, you're almost like nothing happened at the same time. But it's like, yeah, you just won't know who you are anymore. But it'll be, I think, the most powerful experience of that. But I just want to say, don't worry, because eventually everything dies down, and then of course you're changed forever if you become self-realized. But at the same time, everything will calm down. So none of this is permanent. Do you have something, Joe?
Well, yeah, just to reiterate what you said, it's almost like a perfect word for word expression of the ego. Uh, desperately trying to hold itself together just before it, well, not the ego evaporates, but the structural central self that we think we are. So yeah, the ego has been completely rattled by your experiences, and I know that Beata's been on like a more intense um, journey. Like I don't know for how long, but it sounded like it's very a lot of things are happening very quickly. So I think it's very expected that this point would come, sort of around now, and that you are, still identified with this because you're writing in the voice of of literally the ego pleading for it to somehow stay as it was. Um, me and Steve are kind of laughing about it because, like Steve said, like after this passes through, it's like no big deal at all. Um, as in, like the fear about these things are no big deal. It is the most like enormous internal shift that can happen, basically. But um, so I mean, just to put you at ease that you're not doing anything wrong at all, and that something that might be practically soothing is that these things are arising. They are not you doing or being anything wrong. I've always liked the phrase with fear that fear is here. You don't have to be it necessarily, but it's here in your experience. So it might be way too intense to be able to find a place of rest, but awareness is here for you, and it sounds like it's abiding, becoming abiding, because you're seeing everything that the ego has to offer, and it doesn't miss a beat. Once awareness is clicked into place, you can see it all, more and more over time, but if there's been a big shift for you in that recently, it will just be like coming, coming, coming. And I think I just remember in my own experience when I was really starting to see things, it would be like moment to moment. I'd be walking down the street and be like, the ego's here. And then 2 minutes down the road more, it was hiding somewhere else, claiming something else. It was almost, I always saw it as like a skin growing on something, like it would claim it. It was like, here I am, I'm resting here, I'm resting here. So, yeah, it can be a very disorienting experience. Um,
I was going to say it's also interesting because you said like she's speaking as the voice of the ego, which is, totally normal. But it's interesting to read. Like I feel like I don't want to reach in full enlightenment or become self-realized. It's sort of funny because the ego wants this stuff because it thinks number one, it's going to get it without any pain, and two, like that it will become special when it gets it. And so when it's actually starting to really happen, it is so unbelievably painful and uncomfortable that even the ego says, I don't want it anymore because it's not what I thought it was, right? In some ways, it's the most wonderful thing that could happen to you once the bad stuff is gone. But it's not to the ego because you're on the way to this entity disappearing. This is the probably the biggest shift that happens. Um, and then just to address the Kundalini, um, it's not like you have to change if you want to keep using this word. We just want to remind you that Kundalini. So both the chakras and Kundalini is actually coming from the ego. So even the I think it's seven, right? From the root, and you have the seven chakras. I haven't heard Artem saying this, and it makes complete sense that you could see the chakra system as the way that the ego sees the awakening journey. That's all that it is. So it's like the crown chakra is supposed to be like what connects you to the divine. So it's like the ultimate, or it's seen as like enlightenment, the closest thing to enlightenment. But again, it's just an idea that people believe in and they think that this is very real. And then she said Kundalini, and it stopped at the heart. So I guess you're thinking that the energetic snake, whatever they call it, that's supposed to be the Kundalini energy, rises from the first chakra and then it like unblocks all of them until you're enlightened, basically. Which, funny enough, never happens to people who are talking about that stuff because they're still believing in that stuff. But so I just wanted to make sure that you kind of, I think that maybe the word Kundalini speaks to something very specific, which is probably the most difficult moments in awakening, which is the moments that people start to experience a level of terror that they didn't know was even possible. And this is when a lot of people actually call the ambulance and then they're taken to a psychiatric hospital. So that's the level of difficulty. And so I think people often use Kundalini to mean that when this unbelievable thing is happening. I would say that it's if you're in awakening and you're really doing things that most human beings are not, really digging and trying to see all of your pain, you'll hit something that's really deep that you don't, it's just too much pain at once, and then you'll have this Kundalini experience. But it's not stopping at your heart. I mean, yeah, I think it's just easier not to even think of those things, but if you do want to think about them, it's okay. But it's like it can make you feel like I don't know if it's helping you to feel more in control or less in control, that there's this energy that's rising within you. I don't know. My ego wants to live. Yeah.
I was going to add that um it literally just evaporated out of my mind. What was I going to say? Um, well, another thing that I was going to say was that the oh yeah, what you were going to say that the ego wants to live. It's that the now the ego is maybe getting dented and a bit more transparent. Um, it's kind of seeing that the reality of this journey is it not existing. So it doesn't get anything. It doesn't attain self-realization, and it is enlightenment is the absence of it. So that lies in complete um, contrast to its desire to live forever. So if it's starting to witness itself dissolve a little, then it's going to freak out completely. Oh, I almost had it again. Um, so all of this is incredibly scary, but to not confuse your ego with you, that there's anything wrong with you. So I just wanted to really reaffirm that there's nothing wrong and that the ego will blather on continuously about what's going on being you. That's not you. This is an illusion, a very convincing one that goes on and on and on. But if you can find some space within there to just remember that what's happening, however terrible it is not actually you. It's a playing out of yeah these ego cries and distresses. Um, so just you can always if you want to ground yourself, then that would be something that I could suggest. Just to remember that this will pass, but as Steve detailed, it is a really, really difficult thing to go through.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's maybe useful to the I guess the reality, what is shifting exactly? What is like what's going to be the difference? It's that right now, obviously you're a body, but you're still identified with parts of the ego. And I almost see it like a bouquet of flowers where you're getting one and you're holding it tightly. I'm I mean, probably it's crumbling already, but I'm a good person. I come, she's from Poland and this and that, and you have all these things and you're holding it as the center of who you are. And you know, basically this is where the mind always goes back to. So it's almost, you're doing this without any effort, but it's like, this is who I am, right? So it's almost like the same facts. Like I come from this country, I've done, this has happened to me, all these things are happening. It's a center of experience. And so what is literally going to change is that this center of experience, eventually the identification, which is a very important word, the ego doesn't go away in self-realization, but the experience of you in your mind being glued to ego parts and holding, you're not doing anything, and that's just how we all are. You're holding it in your mind as a center of experience. And then eventually, when this is over, this is gone. And so you can imagine that your experience now is that we've said this before, self-realization, you will experience yourself just as an analogy, as a container. So you could say that the mind becomes this container. And instead of being identified with these few parts of yourself, your experience now becomes that you are the, let's say, infinite space of the mind, and inside the ego will now appear. But see, it's very, very different if your experience is that you are this infinite space that is the mind, where the ego arises and goes away. Whereas when you're not having an experience that you are this infinite space and that you are certain ego parts and you're holding on to some, and some are unfamiliar, they come to you and then you're terrified and you're judging and all this, it's a completely different experience. But it's like it's almost exciting to read. I think it's probably the first person to read where they're like really, it seems like it's going to happen. It's funny to talk about it this way. It's like it's going to happen. But it's incredible because once it happens, it's like the relief, it's a permanent relief. And when the rest of the ego comes, it will be infinitely easier to feel and to release.
Yeah,
So you did everything right.
exactly. And your ego has been keeping you safe from all of the things that your nervous system and mind deemed that were unsafe to see and feel for all of these years. So it's another natural part of to be terrified because there's something in there that knows that when the ego starts to break down or be seen through at the very least for what it is, that cannot keep a lid on things as it once did in the same way. However, because it's happening, you will be ready for that. It can't happen and then you not be ready. It's impossible. You're aware enough and open enough for these things to come now. Um, but because the ego, keeps you safe from all of these terrifying things and, keeps you behaving in certain ways so as to not deal with things in real life as far as your nervous system's concerned. Um, the prospect of that safety net being compromised in any way, it will be terrifying. Um, so just to explain another angle of why, this is such a scary thing. Um, but even if it doesn't feel like it, just, hopefully the words will coach you through that everything is going right and that it's really painful, but you will pass through it and there will be a permanent shift, the likes of which you couldn't have imagined on the other side of it.
Yeah, and I wanted to say because I'm just like remembering what happened to me. Um, they're, dying, feeling like you're dying. So when it gets very deep, you will feel like you're actually dying. Like it's not a spiritual thing, like you're going to die in a minute. And though it's the most difficult thing, I remember when I felt that way and my heart rate was going so fast that eventually, you might pacing back and forth. I don't know what to do. This is unbearable. And then the best thing is to just lie on the ground if it's comfortable, like in your living room, and just close your eyes. And yes, it's the most terrifying thing ever. Your mind will probably say, if I close my eyes, I will disappear forever. And I don't want to disappear, but it's just something happening in your mind. And so if you are in these moments, the peak moments of suffering and fear, when you can, right after you've been walking around trying to solve it, when you finally, like, it's too difficult, just try to lie down and it's like it's almost like I don't want to say, but it's like, but then close your eyes and do the thing that you don't want to do, which is what is the biggest fear that's happening there, and you close your eyes and you look at it. So usually it is the fear I'm going to disappear, which translates into I'm going to die now. And if that happens, then you'll feel like you're literally saying goodbye, like you're dying, like you're saying goodbye to your children, to everybody. Um, I remember when I didn't want to actually close my eyes because it was absolutely real that I was dying for real. And I said, I don't want to die. And if I close my eyes, I feel like I'm going to die. And then I kept waiting a little bit and waiting. And then something just said to me, now you have to let go. And so if you are going to die, I can't keep waiting. It's too difficult. So now if I am, it's an illusion, but it's like, fine, if I'm going to die, then I'm going to die. And then you close your eyes. it's so I'm saying this because even though it's what we don't want to do the most, when you finally can't stand it anymore, the thing that will make it move faster is to look at the thing that is the most terrifying, which is disappearing, dying. Okay. So the final question. This is from Mpande. Um, okay, so it just says I and question mark. When our bodies awaken from deep sleep, how does the mind give rise to the sense of I? I have just woken up. If the mind is objective and being perceived, but the perception somehow happens through using the mind, is the mind giving the mind a sense of I we perceive to be? But who is perceiving the perceiver to be able to be aware that it is perceiving? Who is able to be aware or perceive that awareness has now become fixed, right, or abiding, permanent? But that in its essence is like also saying the fixed awareness, the fact that you're able to say it is fixed in place, and it's always just there watching. Who is watching the very watching of the awareness fixed in place? I like that. Um, so when I read this, the first thing that came to mind is to share something that happened to me while I was in the worst part of the awakening journey. Kind of like what we were just saying with Beata. I was kind of like that. So I don't know, it probably happened 20 times and I hated it so much. I would wake up in the middle of the night. My room was like really, really dark because that's how I like it. And and then basically it was pitch black, so I couldn't see anything. And so it has everything to do with what you're saying. For about 20 seconds, I didn't know who I was, where I was, nothing. Absolutely nothing. I didn't even have the thought, I don't know who I am. I was just like in this blackness and just looking, right? And this unbelievable, like just the most horrible panic. And I was trying to find like a wall. So I couldn't remember I'm on a bed. I couldn't remember absolutely anything. And so when I finally, thank God my room is actually very little. And so I found the window pretty quickly. And then immediately the I returned, which is very interesting. So in half a second, everything is, oh, I'm in my bedroom at this house and everything back to normal. And so I think that as we're awakening, that can happen because that's what the question is about. The I, which is the ego, which is has all of this information, really is something artificial, right? And so it almost in a way, this mechanism, it has to return so that you, I mean, as long as you have an ego, so that you have the normal experience of having an ego. Um, so that I just wanted to share that it's interesting because then that's also memory loss, which doesn't exactly happen. You're not going to forget who you are. But oh, the other thing that I wanted to mention related to this, I was dreaming, I was asleep, and then I wake up, I can't remember who I am. Um, when we dream, which is also part of the ego, in order for the dreams are like literally visual thoughts, right? Very detailed, and then they become scenes and universes and worlds inside of our minds. So when you're in the dream, you're a dream character, right? And you have eyes. They're fake eyes because everything, it's just an illusion, but you're looking, right, at a mountain, at a beach. And so the dream character, you're always busy with the dream, right? If it's not lucid dreaming, you're busy with the illusion of the dream. So let's say that you make up a story where you have to go get across the valley to give someone a present, just the most crazy dream. And you're very wrapped up in that story. So the dream character is like, yeah, I got to go there. You don't remember that you're, like, let's say I live in Canada. You don't remember your name usually. I mean, you could. So you don't have the information of the real you. So that shows you that in order for you to go into the dream, you must forget who you are. And funny enough, that's what happened to us when we were very little and we didn't have any of this nonsense. And then the dream started, the ego started in the mind, and we forgot who we were, which is kind of a weird way to say you weren't anything, you were just the five senses, but that's basically what you forgot. And then you lost yourself deeper and deeper into a dream. So I just wanted to share that. One more thing is the question about, awareness perceiving itself. Um, I want to again stress that there's basically a difference between pure awareness of the five senses versus mental awareness. And some people think that mental awareness is like the awareness, which is like God or whatever, but it's literally not. It's the mind's ability to watch itself. So just like a computer that would have this program that can monitor itself, that's what awareness is. And then I would say that this mental awareness that can watch the mind can also imagine a little third program. And it's like this is going to watch the watcher. So I think that's what it is. Um, do you have any thoughts, Joe?
Yeah, just to, I guess, make it clear that the pure awareness is the space in which everything arises. So there is no actual separation between the pure awareness, the mental awareness that sees the ego. It's almost like, in my mind, it is like a three-tiered system, but really it's all coming into the same space. But the I, the believed I, the I of the ego, uh, is a product of. Okay, so we lost connection a little bit there. So I'll start my point again, which was just to make it clear that pure awareness, which is that from which all arises, all that we experience, um, includes the ego, the I, the self, and the mental awareness that sees it. They are not separate. They're all within pure awareness. However, there's the illusion of separation of like one thing seeing the other and who's seeing what and how do I label one and the other and where are they? They're all one, but in our interpretations, there's the illusion of these separate entities. The I, the egoic I, arises from our repressed emotions. It's a coping mechanism that arises in our mind, and it's an illusion. So it's not a physical, tangible thing, but it's compounded and reinforced, and uh, it becomes solid to us in our mind over years and years and years. So it seems like a separate thing. It's this me that's arising, that's here, like separate to this, but it's not. That's the illusion part. And then, as Steve said, there's the mechanism within the mind that can see itself. Um, but still all happening within the same plane of pure awareness. But these other parts are illusory. So there's not like really one th other thing seeing another thing. They're just one thing seeing itself ultimately, but there's the illusion of multiple things going on at once.
Yeah. Um, well, I just wanted to say that it's a little bit tricky because you said pure awareness, which is, where everything happens. Um, I'm just going to ask you now, how would you differentiate that? I get that it's everything, but then, for example, the five senses, of course, they're happening inside the ultimate awareness. But then
Oh
there
yeah.
there is a difference between the senses and then this mental awareness.
Yeah. So when I said pure awareness, I mean that's the awareness that we experience unfiltered by the ego. So I don't necessarily mean like the actual substance of things, like beyond what we can comprehend. There's the awareness of our experience, which is the what's there beneath the ego and beneath mental awareness. Um, so within that, there's a dream is occurring because it's an infinite space. I mean, it's infinite within our experience. You know how I've thought of it, there's like infinite numbers between one and two,
Yeah.
or infinite. So there is still an infiniteness to our five senses, and that's the pure awareness that I'm talking about. Um, So within that infinite, unbounded awareness, a dream has occurred within our minds, which includes a mental awareness that can perceive an ego self.
So it's like almost like a limited or localized awareness, which is this mental awareness that
Yeah.
seems to be like this separate thing, but it's happening in
Yeah.
this infinite ocean of pure awareness. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So the by and these things have arisen um initially the ego arises because of repressed emotion, and it's a mental tool for survival in the world. And our system, our biological system, needs it as far as the nervous system is concerned to stay safe and stay alive or receive love from a parent, and so on. And then the mental awareness that can encompass it and witness it arises as part of a duality to parent it, as we've said, to be a space of non-judgmental awareness, so unconditional love for all this pain to be processed, and then when every crumb of pain is processed, self-realization's occurred, but the ego's still here, and we're still burning through it, but it gets down to nothing. It's dissolved, therefore there's no reason for this to exist anymore. As parent to no child, this falls away, and what we have left is the pure awareness that was always there, but these illusions have dissolved because the physical processes necessary for them to do so have occurred. But there was never multiple things happening. It was always perceptually um, occurring within pure awareness.
Yeah, and I wanted to stress because I don't think I hear it pretty much anywhere. And I think you mentioned it that this mental awareness, which is what looks at all of the ego, is the last part of the ego to go. So people, I don't think I've heard anybody ever say that awareness, this awareness that has, watched all of this activity, that is the ego. That is the first part of the ego that appeared when you were very small and you were enlightened, and then you fell to the fourth level of dreaming, and this awareness appeared, which is we said like the inner parent, right? Your parents couldn't look at your emotions objectively and not react to them. And so it's almost like the mind is so intelligent that's like, okay, I'll create my own parent inside that can look at all of this, right? But eventually that goes. I mean, we're not there yet, but it's interesting how once there's no more pain, then it still stays there because I guess this process is so deep. Um, yeah, it's just interesting how it stays there. And then I guess you're drunk on enlightenment, and that's the last thing that has to disappear.
Mm. And I would add, I think Steve already mentioned it, is that many, if not most people get confused with this, finding this mental awareness, this observer, this space that can see the ego, misidentifying, finding this and resting there as being enlightenment, as being the end. When it's not the end of anything, it's just the other half of this self. There's a process that occurs where they're bonded like this, and you believe that you're the ego, and the awareness is not visible to itself yet. And then it starts to show itself, and then it sees through this and realizes that there was no person identity-wise there to begin with, but they are like two halves of one thing. Um, but you'll see many people talk about finding this, and this is the be all and end all. And once you realize you're this and not this, then it's all over. But it's not true, because just finding this doesn't do anything to this going anywhere. You still have all of this. You see it for what it is. That's the difference. You see it clearly, but it still lives in your body. It's a physical thing. So all of what we just said sounds very out of this world a little bit. It's hard to put like normal language to these things. But this is all to do with like a physical process. It's suppressing emotions in the body that give rise to these things. And then they should have never been here in the first place. This unbounded, pure awareness is what we are, of which everything arises within in our experience. Everything that is here it's just through our experience, and that's what we are. Um, I can't remember where I was going with that. Um, I guess the point is to ground it, is it sounds a bit hard to follow and maybe a bit out of touch with reality. It's once you start speaking about these things. Um, but the point is this problem of the ego and its counterpart, mental awareness, have arisen because of a physical process, and they resolve through a physical process, and the entire thing is physical. Um, I guess again, the thing that we can always bring it back down to is that all animals, and we use the example of a duck because it's the not a very glamorous one, is in this state of unbounded, pure awareness as is a baby. This is where all things are naturally. But maybe because we're so complex and our brains have the capability to create these insane illusions, we've fallen we've fallen into it for some reason. Who knows why?
Yeah, and just to finish, I was going to say that when people find awareness, you said I see some videos and I'm like, oh my God, this is not going to be good for a lot of people, but they like the message because they want to escape their pain. Um, when someone has basically, they've become a little familiar with their awareness, they see it in their mind. um, what happens is they kind of hold the awareness hostage. So they realize that if they kind of focus there, that they feel this neutrality. There's no, almost like numb, actually. That's what it is because they're dissociating. But they don't call it dissociating, they call it being in awareness. And so what's very interesting is first, when people do that, um, they're far from self-realization because self-realization is when your experience is sort of like you have become awareness, and awareness would never run away from pain. It becomes so easy compared to before that why would you run away from pain, right? There wouldn't be much of a reason. And the second thing is, what was I going to say? When someone, I'm not going to say who it is, but I see this one guy where the things that he says reveals that he says that he's even enlightened. He says this is what enlightenment is when you find awareness and then you just keep focusing there. And then he says you don't feel anything anymore. Emotions arise and you just don't feel them. Um, you will be able to see that someone that thinks they're enlightened, when they are challenged, they have zero empathy and zero compassion, right? Somebody could come up and say, "Oh, but I think this is wrong and I still suffer a lot." And they'll say like, "Oh, then keep suffering." That's literally the comments that I hear, right? By all means, that was one of the things you wrote, by all means, keep suffering. So when you see someone like that, when you can see, like we can see it so easily, it's like there has been almost no transformation. Person has convinced themselves that they're enlightened because they found awareness and they're kind of holding it hostage. They haven't become awareness. They found it and they're kind of holding it tight, hoping that they won't ever feel anything again. And so, what they're doing to their pain, to that little child inside of them, which is, I don't see you. You're an illusion. I don't have time for you. You'll see that that's how they respond to people who are in pain. It's just so obvious once you can see it. So it's funny holding awareness hostage. It's funny. Even that fascinates me that the ego is able to use that as a weapon to not feel. And the reason that these people say this, that there's no pain to feel, is because the ego is saying, don't look for pain, because if you find it, I'm going to start to disappear. So I'm comfortable with you not looking at any pain. Just keep not looking, and I'm going to be fine here. I'm going to stay here for the rest of your life. You're going to be trapped in ego.
Yeah, because let's not forget when finding awareness, mental awareness has happened, the ego is still there, strong, so it's still going to be doing all of its usual tricks and tools to not be seen, to keep you there. Because again, it's not divisible from awareness. It's just an extension. It's just the another part. Um, so it's I think we've said before on a live or a Q&A that the ego wants to reside in awareness because it's more spiritual over there. It's more, it has more. of what spirituality is meant to have, and it can kind of see again. I don't know. I'm just thinking of this now, but I don't know if the ego can see awareness as awareness can see the ego. It's like, oh, I like that. I like that. I want to be that instead of
Yeah.
this. Um,
I think the ego makes can make absolutely anything an object. So I
yeah.
remember when I remember like the unbelievable arrogance and blindness of the ego, um, to say something like, so it's like something like, those people will never have the peace that I feel. So
Mm,
the ego has made peace, which is literally the absence of ego. It doesn't see it as an absence, but as an object, as a almost like as an award, and then it's like I've got more of this,
mm,
and people don't. And I just wanted to add one more thing when we're talking about this stuff. If I hope some people will get to the very end. Um, in my mind, my awareness is like, I wonder if some people will listen to us talk and then think that we are not aware that there's ego because there so is, right? Self-realization is when you realize that all of it is imaginary, but that's when you have the freedom to explore all of it because you don't take it seriously, right? So even as I'm speaking, this is an example of watching yourself, right? I talked about that person that I'm not going to name, of course. And of course, I'm sure there's a little bit of my ego in there, like this person is doing it wrong, right? How dare them bypass their pain? Maybe there's a part of my ego that's so identified with like, I never bypass. That's a good one, right? I'm
yeah.
so amazing. I never bypass. I just face all my pain. I face all my fears. And so it's an example of that's how awareness is always there. And I play into it because I know it's not real and I want to see the truth of it. What is the depth of it? And so, when we're talking about these things, the freedom, I don't know if anybody watching us is going to think that we're like not holy, but like thinking that we're like these like sweet people that never have, it's the opposite of that because we're free to explore all of this. But it's like if I talk about this person that I just did, that's this message, just focus on awareness and there's no more pain. Um, yeah, there's a part of mine that's like, what fucking idiot, right? He'll never get to my level. That's that's a pure, honest moment that I just did right now. That's sort of the experience of self-realization. There's still so much arrogance and all that, but it's not. You could say it's mine, but it's technically this craziness that's just still in my mind, and I'm just going to keep loving it, giving it attention, embodying it, and
Mm,
then just slowly going to keep dissolving.
yeah. And the point is that it means nothing to anyone. There's no central Steve or Joe who's like, oh, but can I say, fuck that guy, he's a fucking idiot. He doesn't know anything about spirituality, and I do. Look at all my explanations, how much better and more deeply realized they are of his. You know, it's so obvious that that's there, but it doesn't mean anything to anyone. But as in like no central self that would be like a negative addition to. But it's attached to pain. That's the
Yeah.
point. So the freedom to explore that's the freedom to explore because you see it you can't not see it come up in everything, and you're not afraid to look at it and be like, go deeper into it. Um, I was just going to say that you may have heard the expression like the perceiver and the perceived collapse or like fall into one. This is a phrase back to Mpande's question about like who's seeing what, and the fact that it all arises from one, and it really as in like we there's the illusion that there is someone seeing something,
Uh,
but they are both uh in or a part of the pure awareness. So it's almost like the illusion of these seemingly two things collapsing into the one thing that they always were. And this is the essence of non-duality, as in not two, that there is only one. Although that's a paradox because if you say that, then you create a duality of not the other one. So it's a bit of a tongue twister, but this is what non-duality is in its essence. There is no separation really. There's the illusion. There's only the illusion of it. A very, very, very convincing illusion that 99.9% of people believe entirely from the moment they become sentient to the moment they die. Um, but this journey reveals the reality over time that there is no one and two. It's just a singular occurrence.
And I was going to say, I think what makes it confusing is that humans, compared to animals, all animals can't speak, and humans can. And so, even if someone is enlightened, they can still talk about, for example, their vision. So Artem can say, "Oh, my vision is like this," and yet this is what makes it confusing. Because if we didn't speak, if we were just like animals, then it would make more sense. Which is, if I always see squirrels even here now. A squirrel, if you look at them, they are not aware that they're seeing. They just see. That's what it is. Right? It's so difficult to really show what enlightenment is. They are so there's no mind, there's no all this stuff that we have. And so of course they're seeing, right? They're like trying to find nuts or whatever, and they're using their vision. But there has never been for a second even a recognition I am seeing because there's no I. All that's happening is seeing, right? So I think but then when it comes to a human being, even after they're enlightened, they're just like the squirrel. This is what's confusing. They can still comment, and the comment seems to create a separation, but in their experience, there is no more separation, like Artem, but they can still talk about it. I think this is what makes it a little bit confusing.
Yeah. And I just had a thought that it might not have been exactly clear when I was giving the example of seeing arrogance. Steve gave the example and I did as well. And seeing, it's all about seeing your own arrogance and cruelty. It's not that it doesn't matter. Like, it's not that I no longer don't care about being actually cruel to someone. That's not it at all. It's the opposite. It's having the non-judgmental space to witness my own cruelty and the depths of it and to not judge it. And by doing that, that's loving it and accepting more of myself that was always there, just as the other parts that were favored by the ego that were seen, nice, kind, caring, empathetic. So I just want to make it very clear that it's not in this process you stop caring about these things. That's not it. It's that you become able to accommodate all of the parts of yourself that you had rejected, and you can see them clearly, but they don't correspond to an idea of a internal self.
Yeah, exactly what you just said. Funny enough, because you're loving yourself, that's what it means. Giving attention to something is to love it. Um, you know, the things that I have done in my mind and acted out are the most despicable, most vile things that I won't mention. And funny enough, when I've done that, most people think, my God, this person's a monster. And then if someone is speaking to me or whatever, I'm like the most compassionate person, meaning like, so you see how crazy it is? It's like the more you see you're evil, but you're seeing it from awareness. You're not harming anyone, you're loving. So it's like, oh, here's the psychopath inside of me that doesn't care about, just would kill people. Well, I'm not crazy. I'm not going to do anything to actual people, but I can play with this like an actor, right? And then get comfortable with it. And once I've gotten comfortable with it, then somehow there's more, it's almost you could say there's more love in my mind because this was living in my mind, the psychopath, and it was being hated. This is a monster. Once I've gotten comfortable with it, like this chunk of my consciousness has been loved, almost like wrapped in a present, like, oh, this has been loved. And so if that's been loved, I know the depth of pain that people feel, which will translate into me being more and more compassionate and kind. So see how funny it is. It's like the people that have seen the most horrible things inside of them from awareness will be the most loving people, right? And it seems to be contradictory, but it's not.
Yeah, great. Should we wrap it up there? I think that's a good place to
Yes.
end. Great. All right. Well, thank you everyone for submitting your questions. We'll do the next live on Monday. and the next Q&A a week today. So please submit your questions as usual um, in the community, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Bye.